Arabic. Introduction with text samples in Old Hejazi, Classical Arabic, and Middle Arabic. Assalamu alaikum ya mushahideen. I finally made it. I'm finally recording my next video on Arabic. Yeah, much later than I had originally planned, but you know, I have a life and I'm a grad student. I need to work on papers and things, so it took me quite a lot of time, but I finally made it. And you also might be glad to hear that all my following videos are already work in progress. So the next video after this one will be Old North Arabian, after that Old South Arabian, and after that Ethiopic or Giz, and then I'm done with Semitic, and then as a special feature I'll also do 3 videos on Egyptian, namely a general introduction, then a video with hieroglyphic Egyptian, Old Egyptian, Middle Egyptian, Late Egyptian, maybe Demotic, and finally a video on Coptic, and then I'm completely done with what I had planned. Okay, so everything is work in progress. I just can't tell you exactly when the subsequent videos will be released. Inshallah soon, but it depends on how much I have to do, because it's either grad school or when I'm on vacation, then well, it's spending my vacation somewhere doing something fun. Okay, not that this isn't fun, but you know, I have a life. So now finally, Arabic. What will this video be about? So all my videos are basically more or less the same thing with differences. So usually I give you some general info on a certain language. It's always an ancient Semitic language. In my video on Aramaic, I didn't read any modern Aramaic like Toroyo or something like that. So also this video will be on older forms of Arabic, and you see them on this first slide here. It'll be on Old Hejazi and of course Classical Arabic, and also some Middle Arabic, which I had also done before in my old videos. Yeah, so it'll be some general information, and then basically some how do you read it, and showing you the alphabet and how do you read Arabic with this video. This video is very much focusing on Classical Arabic as described in the Kitab Sibawayh, because I'm assuming a lot of my viewers know Arabic, and why should I just read modern standard Arabic to you? If you want to hear that, you can watch Al Jazeera or something like that. So this will be something from the past, something from the history of the language that even some speakers of Arabic might not know. And the things I'm presenting to you today, I didn't know some of those facts until shortly before I started working on this video. So by looking at Sibawayh, old sources like that, I've learned a lot. And what did I learn? I want to present that to you now in this video. Okay, so let's go and start to talk about Arabic. Alright, first slide, as usual, I'll talk a little about the position. Let me get the laser pointer. The position of Arabic within the Semitic language family. Well, Arabic is a West Semitic language, and within West Semitic it is nowadays usually counted as Central Semitic, and this is the first non-East and non-Northwest Semitic language I'm doing my video, because the first language I've talked about was Akkadian. You can see Akkadian here. It belongs to the East Semitic branch of Semitic, and then I've talked about Ugaritic, Canaanite, Hebrew, which also belongs to Canaanite but got an extra video, Aramaic. All of those are Northwest Semitic, and where we are now in this video is right here in Arabic, so another sub-branch of Central Semitic next to Northwest Semitic. Okay, we are here now. And the next video after this one, I already told you, it'll be Old North Arabian. Old North Arabian is an umbrella term for different Semitic languages. Some belong here, Arabic, and some belong to Central Semitic, and some probably belong to West Semitic and form extra branches, but more details on that in the future. And then I'll also talk about Old South Arabian, which also belongs to Central Semitic, and the last video will be on Ethiopic. So we also go into the South Semitic branch that has been a thing in the past, and also in the past, like a couple of decades ago, Arabic was seen as South Semitic, but all of this has been revised. So if you want to know more about Central Semitic and all these sub branches of Semitic, just watch my first video. Yeah, but South Semitic is kind of sometimes seen as outdated, or maybe more like an areal contact group instead of a genetic branch. Nevertheless, just for convenience, I'm using this here. So this will be my last Semitic video. And then modern South Arabian, well, there are so far no ancient sources. There are inscriptions in the Dhofar region of Oman, but they haven't been deciphered yet. So there may be some ancient inscriptions that represent an early form of modern South Arabian, but we don't know yet. So sorry, no video on modern South Arabian. It's not ancient, it's modern. Okay, but today we are here, Arabic. Okay, let's look at another family tree of the Semitic language family. So this is a more detailed tree of Central Semitic, okay? And again, you can see one of the main sub-branches of Central Semitic, namely Northwest Semitic, Ugaritic, Canaanite, Aramaic. I've talked about all of those in other videos. And then we have the Arabic sub-branch, or some also call it North Arabic, where we have Northern Old Arabic with some varieties like Safa'idic and Hismaic. They are attested in the Old North Arabian script. See these, you'll see these in the next video. And Nabatean Arabic, and you also have the dialect Old Hejazi, which is, you saw it in the title screen, which is very important for this video. Other Central Semitic languages that can't so far be connected to any other sub-branches so far, partly due to the lack of sources, Dadanitic and Hassaitic. You'll also hear about these in the next video. And then within Central Semitic, you also have ancient South Arabian, which is Sabaic, Minaic, Atabanic, and Hadramitic. Those will be featured like 2 videos from now. So this is video 8, 9, 10 will be about these. Okay, and also the unity of this group is kind of complicated. Does Sabaic really belong to the others? Are the others really Central Semitic? I'll talk about that in detail. So what we'll focus on today is Arabic, and there will be Old Hejazi, and then something else that we call Classical Arabic, and then there will be something called Middle Arabic. Yeah, so that's today's video. So the Arabic language, let me tell you a little about the history of Arabic. How did classical Arabic come into being? What is classical Arabic? What are its origins? Classical Arabic has several sources, namely, mainly, one of the main sources is the Quran. Okay, the Quranic consonant text, the QCT, the original text of the Holy Book of Islam, the Quran, was written in a purely consonant script. If you read it today, modern editions, there are vowel signs, but the initial text was purely consonantal. That is something to keep in mind when talking about the pronunciation of the form of Arabic that this text was written in. That form of Arabic is an early Arabic dialect that we call Old Hejazi Arabic. Okay, so the Quranic consonant text originally was written in Old Hejazi Arabic in the early 7th century CE. Alright, and I will show you a couple of the features of Old Hejazi Arabic and how it differs from Classical Arabic, because there's some really interesting stuff going on there that I myself found surprising at first, but then completely logical after I read some articles on Old Hejazi Arabic. Okay, one other source of Classical Arabic is poetry. Orally transmitted poetry from the pre-Islamic era, Bedouin poetry from the Arabian Peninsula, written by poets like some very famous poets like Imru al-Qais, and you might know them if you know a thing or two about the poetry of the Jahiliyyah period. So this is also very important source because this was basically not a dialect but more like a poetic language. And you know poetry. What is poetry? Poetry means you basically say the exact same utterances, the exact same text again and again, and it's transmitted throughout generations, and you say the exact same thing again and again, which means poetry often retains very archaic features of a language. And a lot of the features that are seen as classical Arabic, like the i'rab, the tanween, etc., all of these were preserved by poets because, well, they said the same thing again and again for centuries and didn't drop those grammatical features that weren't found in the Quranic consonant text. Okay, so poetry contributed was a very important contribution to the forming of the classical Arabic language. Okay, yeah. So classical Arabic became standardized by grammarians, by Arab scholars in the 8th and 9th centuries, and people like Sibawayh, even though he wasn't an Arab by blood or by birth, people like him wrote great volumes and described this language in great detail, and that is a very important source for us today to understand what this classical Arabic language originally looked and sounded like. Okay, yeah, and so this old Hijazi dialect and this classical Arabic poetry language coexisted with other Arabic dialects. So there were different dialects in the Arabic speaking area back then, which means parts of the Arabian Peninsula, excluding like Old South Arabian speaking area, etc., and parts of the Fertile Crescent. There were different dialects there. And then when the Islamic conquest happened, these dialects started mixing because those Muslim armies recruited people from all over the Arabian Peninsula or from all over the Arabic-speaking world, and they spoke different dialects. And by speaking to each other, those dialects slowly started forming a kind of amalgamation of dialects, which we also know from the Hellenistic period when Alexander the Great recruited soldiers from all over Greece. They spoke different dialects. Their dialects started mixing, which formed what we call the Koine, and a similar thing seems to have happened in Arabic, forming a so-called Arabic Koine, kind of mix of different Arabic dialects, but it became one rather homogeneous form of Arabic, and this form then gave rise to the post-classical dialects. So in the Levant, the Shami dialects started to form, influenced by Aramaic, which was spoken there. Same thing in like Mesopotamia. Then in Egypt, these dialects were influenced by Coptic, and so Egyptian Arabic came into being. And then in Northwest Africa, those dialects mixed with the Amazigh languages, so the Darija dialects or Maghrebi dialects formed, etc. Okay, so this is basically the process that led to the situation that we have today, with a really huge abundance of very different dialects that all count as Arabic because they have a common identity and a common standard language. Okay, so this is a short history of the Arabic language. So what we can do now, and I've done this in my other videos, we can look at a couple of features, starting with phonology. And Arabic phonology, and some of you might know this, in the context of Semitic, is quite conservative because classical Arabic has retained the full Semitic consonant inventory, so that means the full inventory of consonants that is assumed to have been the consonant inventory of this hypothetical Proto-Semitic language. So a full consonant inventory, apart from one merger that is definitely there, namely Proto-Semitic S1 and Proto-Semitic S3, have merged into a single S sound represented by the Arabic letter Sin. So I made this chart. You can see these three Proto-Semitic sibilants, S1, S2, S3. S1 probably just a plain sibilant, S2 a lateral, ish. Okay, pronounced with the sides of the tongue, ish. And S3 may have been some kind of affricate, so like t. Okay, and you see in most Semitic language, at least two of them have merged, like in Akkadian, especially Old Babylonian, S1 and S2 have merged and became palatalized. So you have sh, like in shalamu, for example. In Hebrew, apparently in like a Proto-Hebrew or a Biblical Hebrew, these were three distinct sounds still, even though the Phoenician alphabet didn't have three different signs, because Phoenician did merge two of those sounds. So in Proto-Hebrew we have like ish, ish, and is, represented by the letters shin, sheen, and samech. But phonetically or phonologically, S2 and S3, seen and samech, have merged, and this goes as far back as Tiberian Hebrew. So if you want to know more about this, watch my video on Tiberian Hebrew. But that's basically why today and in all traditions of Hebrew you say shin, sin, and samech. So sin and samech basically have the same sound today and also back then in Tiberian Hebrew. You see the same merger in Aramaic, also expressed in the script. So shin and two S sounds represented by samech. Even though this did not, as far as I know, happen in Old Aramaic, but then post Old Aramaic we have this merger. And in Ge'ez, you also see that S1 and S3 have merged, just like in Arabic. Only S2 remained distinct, though in modern Ethio-Semitic languages like Tigrinya, Tigri, and Amharic, they all merged into a single sound. And finally, we see Arabic. Arabic has seen and sheen, and S3 merged with the S1, so also a seen over there. Okay, and this is probably the only constant merger that took place between Proto-Semitic and Arabic, as far or as much as what we know about Proto-Semitic. Okay, the Arabic vowel system is also comparatively conservative, I would say. So also for Proto-Semitic, we assume that there were 3 short vowels and 3 long vowels, which is also what we have in classical Arabic. It looks different in dialects, and it also looks different in Old Hejazi, but classical Arabic is 3 short vowels, a, I, u, and 3 long vowels, a, I, u, and 2 diphthongs, a and o. Okay, so phonologically, classical Arabic is quite conservative. All right, let's look at some morphology and syntax and things like that. Next slide. So also in terms of morphology, classical Arabic, and this doesn't necessarily involve Arabic dialects, but classical Arabic is quite conservative, as it has retained a lot of endings, and what you see here are inflectional endings in nouns and adjectives. So you also have the 3-case system that we saw in Ugaritic and Akkadian, for example, and that is reconstructed for Proto-Semitic. So a short u marking the nominative case, a short a marking the accusative case, and a short e marking the genitive or the prepositional case. So maliku, malika, maliki, 3 cases. Okay, and then what Arabic furthermore has is some kind of historically it's a head marking suffix. So, but then practically in classical Arabic it functions more like a marker of indefiniteness. So malikun, malikan, malikin would be the indefinite forms of this noun malik. Okay, and when this word would be the first phrase of an idafa, as you call it in Arabic, or a genitive construction, then you would delete the final n. So maliku, malikul balad, or malikul bayt, or something like that. So then it is maliku, malika, maliki. It was also interesting, Arabic has a definite article, and when you add that definite article al to the front of the noun, you also lose those head marking or indefiniteness marking final n. So basically this loss of the n when used with the article is what makes it indefiniteness marking. So definite forms would be al-maliku, al-malika, al-maliki. Even though you often just say al-malik, but I'll talk about these pausal forms as well in the video. Over here we have dual forms, malikani, malikaini, and malikaini. So the accusative case and the genitive case merged, which means basically we just have a nominative and an oblique case. Okay. In a genitive construction, you would also lose not just the final e but also the n. So malika, malikai, etc. Those would be the construct forms before a genitive, like malika al-bayt or something like that. Okay. We also have external plural endings, malikuna, malikina, malikina, same merger of two cases here. Now this is what we call the sound plural or the external masculine plural, but Arabic is the first language now in this series of videos that has something else that is very interesting within Semitic, namely the so-called broken or morphological or pattern replacement plural, about which I will talk as well. So this is just the external plural which exists side by side with the so-called pattern replacement plural. Okay, so malikuna, malikina, masculine plural endings. Then we have the feminine forms. Okay, on top was masculine, below is feminine, and as in all Semitic and many Afro-Asiatic languages, feminines are marked with a T, which is why we have malikatun, malikatan, malikatin, with or without the final N. It depends, okay, but I can't give you the full overview of grammar here. Malikatani, malikataini in the dual, and malikatun, malikatin in the plural. So also very basic feminine plural ending that we also saw in Hebrew and in Ugaritic and in Akkadian. So classical Arabic is not very different from Semitic in general, but it has retained a large richness of morphological forms, and this doesn't just apply to the nouns and adjectives, but also to verbs, pronouns, etc. Okay, but just to give you an idea how complex Arabic is in terms of morphology. Now, this interesting thing I wanted to talk about is the so-called broken plural. This is a term that has been borrowed from the old Arab grammarians. Modern linguistics, you would rather call it a morphological plural or a pattern replacement plural or a derivational plural, and there's other terms for that. But broken plural basically means that you don't just add an ending to express the plural, but you change the what can you say, the vowel pattern of the word. So you take the root, the consonant root out of the word, and fit it into a different vowel pattern, into a different prosodical form. And I've chosen some examples here. So for example, you see, and let me use my pen to do some drawing maybe. You see the first word, Rab, like Lord, Ar-Rab, the Lord. And this has three consonants. Okay, number one is Ra, number two is Ba, and number three is Ba. So the pattern is consonant, short A, consonant, consonant. Okay, let me use the laser pointer. So first consonant, short A, second consonant, third consonant. And the plural form is Arbab. So again, we have the consonant root here. Ra is number one, Ba is number two, and the other Ba is number three. So the same root, but a different pattern. The pattern is glottal stop, short A, consonant, consonant, long A, consonant. Okay, and that is basically the principle of the so-called broken plural. So the singular pattern is C, short A, C, C. And the plural pattern, glottal stop, A, C, 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 just meaning consonant, long A, C, another consonant. And you see this pattern with other nouns here, like, for example, qawm, aqwam, yawm, Ayyam. So one of the vowels became a ya. No problem. It's still the same thing. Ard. There are different patterns. There's aradi, which is al-aradi or aradin, urud, and arad. And this long a stands for glottal stop, short a, and the other glottal stop, which is the first root letter. Okay, and basically you can see that some nouns have different plural patterns that are all correct. So you can use all of them. Okay, in modern standard Arabic, very often there's just one or two plural patterns that are still used. Many other are outdated. But in classical Arabic, you have this richness of plural forms. So for qawm, you can say aqwam, but also aqawim, aqawim, and aqaim. For rasul, you can say rusul, rusl, arsul, and rusala. Okay, for yawm, you can say ayyam and ayawim. And for adab, you can say a'adhibat, which is with the nominative ending would be a'adhibatun or al-a'adhibatu, or in the so-called pausal form, a'adhiba or al-a'adhiba. Okay, so you don't just put plural endings to nouns in Arabic, but many nouns, especially masculine nouns, have these broken plural forms or pattern replacing plural forms, which we haven't seen before in Akkadian and Canaanite, but we also see these, for example, in Old South Arabian to some extent, though in Old South Arabian we cannot see the vowels, and also in Ethiopic. And you will see in Ethiopic, like in Ge'ez, you have many of the same plural patterns, but they are used for different nouns, which is super interesting. But for now, I'll just focus on Arabic. So, yeah, this is one very important feature of Arabic morphology and the morphology of like Ethio-Semitic, Old South Arabian, and modern South Arabian. One other thing that is neat about Arabic is the inventory of verb stems, which is quite complex. So you have the G stem, the basic stem with like 3 different thematic vowels. So there are fa'ala verbs, fa'ila and fa'ula. Fa'ula are mostly like adjectival verbs, like hasuna, to be good. Fa'ala are mostly dynamic verbs, and fa'ila mostly like more passive verbs. So this is the suffix conjugation and the prefix conjugation. There are also 3 thematic vowels. So you have yaf'alu, yaf'ilu, and yaf'ulu. And then you have a D stem, like a Doppelstamm, doubling stem, fa'ala. There's an L stem, which means lengthening, long vowel, fa'ala, yufa'ilu. There's the C stem, causative stem, which in other Semitic languages has a prefixed sheen, like in Akkadian, or a prefixed he, like the Hebrew hif'il. In Arabic, it's a glottal stop, so you have af'ala and yuf'ilu. You don't see the glottal stop in the prefix conjugation. And then you have T stems like tafa'ala yatafa'alu, tafa'ala yatafa'alu. There's an N stem in fa'ala yanfa'ilu. Another T stem with the T infixed into the root, ifta'ala yafta'ilu. And there's stem number 9, which is rare, if'alla yaf'allu, mostly used for color terms like ihmarra, something became red. And a CT stem, istaf'ala yastaf'ilu, where we still have the Proto-Semitic causative S prefix combined with this reflexive or reciprocal, etc. T. Okay, and some of these stems you also have in other Semitic languages like Akkadian, Hebrew, and Aramaic, but the Arabic system just seems very full and sound. And basically, these stems are still used in modern standard Arabic and in some of the dialects. Some of them are used, some of them are absent from certain dialects. There are some new stems in some dialects. But there are, classical Arabic, there are actually 15 such verbal stems. So on this slide, you can see the verb stems 11 and 15 that are very peculiar in Arabic. So 11 is if'alla, yaf'allu. 12 is if awala yaf'awilu. 13 is if awala yaf'awilu. 14 if anlala yaf'anlilu. And 15 if anla yaf'anla. Okay, so these are not just very specific to Arabic, but to classical Arabic. Concerning syntax, there are a couple of things you could point out about Arabic, and one thing that makes Arabic stand out a little is the abundance of verbal negation forms. So just a short overview. You see the present tense, the affirmative form, yaktubu, he writes, and negative, you see this negator that is very common in Semitic, just like Aramaic law and Hebrew law, la yaktubu, he doesn't write. Okay, so just the indicative prefix conjugation with the negation word la yaktubu. The past tense, so suffix conjugation, kataba, he wrote. So in classical and modern standard Arabic, there are two different ways of forming the negative. You can say ma kataba, so also the suffix conjugation, but a different negation word. You don't say la kataba, you say ma kataba. And then there's this alternative, lam yaktub. Okay, so another negator, lam, combined with the jussive form of the prefix conjugation, lacking the final vowel. So instead of yaktubu, yaktub, lam yaktub. The future tense, there are two means of expressing the future tense, either saufa or sa. So saufa yaktubu, he will write, or sa yaktubu. And the negation, yet another negating particle, lan, and this is used with the conjunctive, with final a. Lan yaktuba, he will not write. Finally, the imperative, uktub, write, and la yaktub with the prefix conjugation. The jussive form, la taktub, do not write. Okay, yeah, but what you see here is quite nice in Arabic. You have this abundance. Okay, this one is used again, no problem, but this abundance of different negating particles, which is also sometimes used as a means to define what is Arabic and what isn't. And this is important when we talk about Old North Arabian, because some Old North Arabian varieties also have these negating words, negating particle. Yeah, this can be seen as something that justifies categorizing some of these Old North Arabian varieties as being Arabic and not just Central Semitic, but not Arabic. Okay, yeah. All right, so let's take a brief look at the history of the Arabic script. So the Arabic script, the Arabic writing system, has its roots in the Nabatean script, which you saw in the last video on Aramaic, because Nabatean was an Aramaic dialect with its own alphabet, and that script ultimately goes back, you see the Aleph here, ultimately goes back to the Old Hebrew script, which means it goes back to Phoenician. Okay, so at some point, speakers of Arabic from the Arabian Peninsula wrote Nabatean, used the Nabatean alphabet to write Arabic. Okay, and as it usually happens, the script develops further, and the shapes of the letters change. So at some point, the result of what you got from this development were these letter shapes that were the original form of the Arabic alphabet. Now there are a couple of problems using this alphabet to write Arabic. One problem that we've also encountered in like Old Aramaic and to some extent in Biblical Hebrew is that this original Phoenician alphabet did not have the full inventory of signs to represent all the sounds of other Semitic languages that had more different consonants, more distinctive consonants than Phoenician. So the Phoenician alphabet and in consequence also the Nabatean alphabet, for example, did not differentiate or did not have distinct signs for interdental consonants like th and the, and it didn't have distinct signs for ch, for example, okay, or for let's see another example for the emphatic of the, etc. Okay, and yeah, you saw that some languages had solutions for this. So, for example, in Biblical Hebrew, the ayin was used to write both the ayin sound and the rain sound, and the ha or hayth in Hebrew was used to write the ha sound and the ha sound. Okay, and so yeah, the original Arabic alphabet did the same thing. So, for example, this letter dal also represented the sound, and this is ha, also representing ha. So not a big problem. But one other problem that is very specific to the original unpointed or undotted Arabic script is that some letters that were distinct in Nabatean turned up looking the same. So, for example, you see Gimel, okay, and the Nabatean Gimel clearly looks different from the Nabatean Hayth, but then the resulting form in this original Arabic script looked the same. So Gimel looking the same as Ha, Gim or Jim looking the same as Ha, or you have, for example, Ba looking the same as Ta. Okay, and yeah, you can see that this is problematic. So basically, this letter shape here represents at least three different sounds, namely Ba, Ta, Tha, and so at some point grammarians came up with a solution, namely adding the dots that you see today to differentiate between letters. This happened after the Quran had been written, which means the original QCT, the Quranic consonant text, still has these undotted letters that a lot of them are pretty ambiguous. Okay, so let's look on the next slide at the more refined version of the Arabic alphabet. And there you got it, that's the solution. So dots were added to distinguish between different letters. So dot below, ba, dot, two dots above, ta. That's it, quite easy, huh? Or dot below means gim or jim, and no dot means ha. And then furthermore, of course, these dots can be implemented to create new letters and basically express all the sounds of the Arabic language. So you already have the ta with two dots above. Okay, let's add a third dot to create the letter tha. Okay, let's take the ha without a dot. Okay, let's put one dot above to create ha. One dot above the dal to make it dal. One dot above the sad to make it dad. One dot above the ta to make it dha, and one dot above the ain to make it rain. And that's it. And that's basically the Arabic alphabet that is used till the present day. So the thing we look at now is the original form, like one of the sources of classical Arabic. I've mentioned this before, Old Hejazi Arabic. So we'll look at Old Hejazi Arabic, which is the basis of the Quranic consonant text, which is one of the origins of classical Arabic. And I just wanted to point out some of the differences between Old Hejazi Arabic and classical Arabic, because yeah, I've just learned about them recently, and I'm guessing that even some speakers of Arabic that watch my videos maybe haven't been aware of that so far. But some of these are already described by Arabic grammarians in the past. Okay, so one difference in phonology is that Old Hejazi Arabic apparently had the vowels e and o, and not just like these aren't just contracted diphthongs like bet or yom, but these are actually contracted triphthongs. So triphthongs are things like aya and awa, and it looks like aya became a in Old Hejazi Arabic, which was written with the letter ya. And you know that this word like rama isn't really written with ya, but with alif maqsura in classical Arabic. Well, at the beginning, this concept of alif maqsura didn't exist. It was simply the letter ya. Okay, it didn't have two dots below in the beginning because those dots didn't exist at all. It was just letter ya, which was used to express the vowel e because it's phonetically close to e. Okay, so this word was rami. And then at some point, Arab grammarians came and started adding vowel signs, but they were like, okay, this word is written with a ya, but we don't pronounce it with a ya because those grammarians didn't speak Old Hejazi Arabic. They used that poetry language as their basis of the classical Arabic language they created, and what they thought is proper Arabic, the word was with a, rama. So they were like, okay, we cannot change the Quranic consonant text because it's sacred. We can only add signs, which is why they added this little alif sign that you find on top of the ya sometimes, and well, like that they created the letter alif maqsura. Okay, so rami in Old Hijazi Arabic became rama in classical Arabic. Okay, and you know if you inflect this verb, for example, for I through, you get ramaitu. Then you have the diphthong again, and the diphthong remained a diphthong. So ra mai tu is not a problem. But aya, this sequence of three sounds became e. Similar, you had this word al salawatu, which is the prayer al salawatu. This awa sequence apparently became o in Old Hijazi Arabic, written with a waw. So just like a was written with ya, o was written with waw. So al salo, and you even find this letter described by the Kitab Sibawayh, calls it the emphatic Hijazi Alif. So it was permissible to say a salot, but I'll talk about that later. So in Old Hijazi Arabic, we had al-salo, and then again at some point grammarians came, added vowel signs, and they were like, wait a minute, but this is as-salatu, as-salah with a, so they added this tiny alif on top of the waw, which, as far as I know, because I have one of those, you find in certain printed editions of the Quran, whereas in other editions, it is modernized. I think there are editions that would write as-salat with alif instead of waw. Not sure about that because the edition I have in print has the waw with the tiny alif above. But in modern standard Arabic, you write it with alif. That's a more modernized orthography. I don't know why they didn't change it for the alif maqsura and don't write ya instead, but they changed the waw. Anyhow, al-salo became as-salatu. Also, one phonological feature about Old Hijazi Arabic is that it doesn't have a hamza glottal stop except for word finally after a. That is interesting. So, for example, you have like this Proto-Arabic form ra'sun for head. In Old Hijazi Arabic, it's simply ras. Okay, ra alif sin, ras. Whereas classical Arabic, the grammarians said no, there's a glottal stop because the glottal stop apparently was retained in the poetic language. They said, okay, let's put this tiny sign on top there, call it hamza, which the shape of the hamza is based on the shape of the ain. Okay, and they said, yeah, we say ra'sun, ar-ra's. So we put that hamza on top of the alif, and the alif is basically silent, and it's just like it's just carrying the hamza. Okay, yeah, but as I said, word finally after a, it seems like the glottal stop existed. So the word for sky, al-sama'u in Proto-Arabic, in Old Hijazi Arabic, it seems like it was al-sama' because we can see, and this is mostly based on rhyme, if I understood it correctly. But we can see words like this rhyming with words that have long R and another consonant. And it doesn't rhyme with words that only have a long vowel at the end, sorry. Okay, so only based on rhyme, there's this assumption that in these cases, even Old Hejazi Arabic had the glottal stop, even though originally there was no sign for that. So you're right, al-sama, but apparently you're supposed to say al-sama. And then, well, the grammarians again added this hamza sign, this new sign, to make it clear that you say as-sama'u in what those grammarians thought is proper and correct Arabic. Morphology. Morphology, similar to modern Arabic dialects, is a little less complex, so you don't have these case endings. You don't have these tanween endings. So definite nouns basically just have one case, al-mumin. In the dual and plural, there are different endings, just like in classical Arabic, muminan, muminain, muminun, muminin. One thing that stands out a little is that indefinite nouns in the singular have a distinct accusative case, which is written with the alif. So the nominative and genitive would be mu'min, and the accusative mu'mina. And this, of course, if you know Arabic, this later became mu'minan. This became the tanween al-fath, an. But it seems like in Old Hejazi this was just a, which is why it was written with an alif. But the other endings apparently disappeared, which is why you don't have wow or ya in the other cases. Okay, so what I've got here now is a short sample to illustrate how Old Hejaz became classical Arabic. So what we've got here is the original consonant text, no vowel signs and also no dots to differentiate between ba, ta, tha, or between fa and qaf if at the beginning of a word, etc. Okay, so the way you would have read this, and I'll talk about the full alphabet later, but just to give you some examples. This text, okay, the first word is faman, second word kan minkum marida, and you can see the transliteration here, faman kan minkum marida aw ali. Here you have the ain, here you have the ya representing a vowel a, ali. علي سفر فعدة من أيام أخرى. Okay, so that's more or less, and there's some speculation. Old Hejazi Arabic pronunciation isn't quite as clear as classical Arabic. Classical Arabic is it's much clearer because we have all these harakat, vowel signs, and the shadda, and sukun, etc. But this is what it may have sounded like. فَمَنْ كَانْ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَيْهِ سَفَرٌ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ. And also, it seems like there was no hamza, so you wouldn't say min ayyam ukhar, but more like connected. Pronounce it more flowingly, min ayyam ukhar. Okay, فمن كان منكم مريضا أو عليه سفر فعدة من أيام أخرى. Maybe like that. Okay. Second line, أقم الصلاة. And it seems like there wasn't this distinction between sun letters and moon letters, حروف شمسية, حروف قمرية, because they wrote the lam, so apparently they wanted you to say the lam, and then grammarians said a different idea. Okay, so أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس, لدلوك الشمس. إلي, okay, same thing here. You have the a here. إلي غسق الليل. وقرآن الفجر. Okay, not quite sure whether they said fajr, fajr, or maybe pagr, because we don't know a lot of phonetic details about Old Hejazi Arabic, so I'm staying quite close to classical Arabic. All right, yeah, but wa Quran without the glottal stop. There's no hamza. Wa Quran al Fajr. Okay, أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل وقرآن الفجر. This is what Old Hejazi Arabic may have originally sounded like. But then came grammarians, and with the grammarians came their idea of Al-Arabiya. So now what you see here is the text as you would find it today in modern editions, with the dots, with the vowel signs, and with all the extra signs like shadda and sukun, and those small memes that indicate assimilation. And I've changed the transliteration a little to turn it into more like a modern prose pronunciation, or like an ideal underlying pronunciation of Arabic. So this would be فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَى. And normally in prose you wouldn't pronounce before a speech pause the final vowel, so you would just say ukhar, even though there is a case ending ukhara, but you would skip that. فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخرى. Okay, second line, let me use the laser pointer. أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل وقرآن الفجر. And again, yeah, you probably wouldn't say fajri because it's at the end, there's a speech pause, so more like al-fajr. Wa Qur'an al-fajr. Okay, so this should sound like, even though I have an accent because I'm not a native speaker of Arabic, this should more or less sound like a modern standard Arabic pronunciation or modern pronunciation of classical Arabic. Though originally, and well, the channel is called Ancient Semitic. I don't stop at this point because modern pronunciation isn't ancient enough. So let me show you something. What I did now is to apply the rules of the classical pronunciation as it is described in classical sources, which isn't very hard because you find a lot of information concerning that pronunciation in a classical text like these Quran verses, because there's this tradition of reading the Quran called Tajweed, which is very, very close to what we find described by the old Arab grammarians of the 8th and 9th centuries. Okay? So if you learn how to recite the Quran with qalqala, nasalization, and imala and things like that, it's basically very close to the actual historical classical Arabic. We find a lot of information here. We find, for example, that the noon of faman doesn't have a sukun. Why? Because you don't pronounce it as noon, it just becomes nasalization, and you say faman kana. You don't say man, but you say ma because it's followed by kaf. Okay, this, as far as I know, is part of the Tajweed rules, but is also one of the rules that Sibawayh recommends for classical Arabic. Same thing in minkum, there's no sukun on the noon. Why? Because you don't say minkum, you say minkum. Okay, nasalization, minkum. And there are other things here. There's, for example, imala, which means in certain environments, fatha and alif, so a vowels, lean towards ya, which means it's more like air. And also, when the a sound is represented by alif maqsura, and original e, it also always has imala. So you say ala instead of ala. Okay, so there are some rules like that. Also, one other rule that I applied down here is called qalqala. I will talk about all those rules in detail, but there's like a short, purely phonetical, non-phonological schwa inserted, fajr, al-fajr. And there's also something that you may never have heard before, but in Sibawayh, Kitab Sibawayh, there's also an imala of the u, so it's more like u. because there's a kasra following. Okay, so this would be فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ. And I already left out the final vowel because that's how you're supposed to read it. Second line, أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل وقرآن الفجر. Okay, yeah, so there are some extra rules applied, but I will talk about all of those in detail in this video. In more or less detail, it depends, because there are so many details about pronunciation in the Kitab Sibawayh. I found it impossible to cover all of them, really. I tried, and it's a lot. So I'll cover the most important aspects of classical Arabic pronunciation. Yeah, so I mentioned the Kitab Sibawayh a couple of times now in this video because it's very important. So let me just give an overview. How do we know the pronunciation of classical Arabic in the 8th century? My main source was the so-called Kitab Sibawayh, the Book of Sibawayh. Sibawayh or Sibawayhi. This is a Persian name. In Persian, it was probably pronounced like Sibuya. Was a grammarian. He lived from circa 760 till 796 CE, and he is also known as the Imam of the grammarians. I sometimes give you these ibarat in Arabic, so the Imam of the grammarians, and his book is also known as the Quran of grammar, or the Quran of philology. So he was a student of Al-Farahidi, who was also a very important, influential grammarian. And he wrote this book. He wrote Al-Kitab, which is a 5-volume treatment of Arabic grammar. So he describes Arabic in great detail in this massive, several-volume treatise. Okay? One of the reasons he did this was probably because he was a foreigner. He wasn't Arabic wasn't his first language. He learned Arabic, and this book probably was some kind of guide for learners of Arabic. Okay, so a lot of information in there, and I'm sorry if this video was a little choppy, but I sometimes need to pause because I have a cold, and I sometimes need to pause to cough, to sneeze, to blow my nose, to drink something. Anyhow, it's a very extensive book, and the part that is important to this video is the appendix on pronunciation and phonetics, which is detailed. It is massive. It is incredible. So let me just point out some important details of what the Kitab Sibawayh says on the pronunciation of Arabic. First of all, it differentiates between 16 places of articulation, which for that time is amazing. It is not much different from how we would describe Arabic today with today's like means of linguistics and phonetics and phonology. So 16 places of articulation, and he describes some of them in great detail. Tells you exactly where the tongue is, what part of the palate or what teeth are next to the tongue when you produce a certain sound. Super detailed. He also differentiates between 19 voiced or unaspirated and 10 voiceless or aspirated letters. This is not quite clear, and I haven't quite found out yet how to translate these terms. So one of them he calls al-majhura, and the other one is al-mahmusa. Yeah, let's just look at them. So al-majhura in his book is hamza, alif, which is a vowel, not a consonant, but he doesn't really differentiate between vowels and consonants. He just calls them huruf, letters. Okay, so hamza, alif, ain, ghain, qaf, jim, ya, dad, lam, nun, ra, ta, dal, zay, dha, zal, ba, mim, waw. And you would say, okay, these are voiced except for qaf and ta. What are they doing there? They are voiceless in terms of modern phonetics. Yeah, but they are also, if compared to kaf and ta, for example, they are also unaspirated. So it kind of means voiced or unaspirated. Or maybe they were actually voiced in his classical Arabic in his time. So more like qaf, not qaf, but gaf and da. Maybe this is pronounced da, because this one dot wasn't actually pronounced dot. It was something completely different. I'll talk about the da later in detail because this is one of my favorite sounds. Some of you might know I did a video on this letter alone in the past and why Arabic was also called Lughat ad-Dad in the past. Yeah, but these are all, maybe they are voiced, or maybe what he meant was somehow voiced and unaspirated. So the other category is al-mahmusa, which is, they're all voiceless, and maybe they're all aspirated somehow, or these are the voiceless ones that aren't unaspirated. Anyhow, this category contains ha, ha, kha, kaf, shin, sin, ta, sad, tha, and fa. Okay, so very clear distinction between those categories. What else does he do? He also, and I find this, he is brilliant. He differentiates between what we today would call plosives or stops. He calls them ash-shadida, and fricatives, ar-rakhwa. Okay, and then there are some that don't fit in any of those categories. So the plosives or stops are hamza, qaf, kaf, jim, ta, ta, dal, and ba. And you might think that jim or jim doesn't quite fit in there. Well, have you ever heard some Sudanese and some Egyptians speaking Arabic and saying jim, jamal, jamil? That's probably the way he describes this letter in great details. That's probably what it sounded like. So it was more like jim, jim, which is a palatal voiced stop. Okay, fricatives. Fricatives are pretty clear. Ha, ha, rein, kha, shin, sad. Well, now you would think dad is not a fricative. Well, it was because it was something else. Zay, sin, dha, tha, dal, and fa. And then there are some sounds that are ambiguous, or can be both, or just don't fit into those categories. And this one I find interesting. Ain can be both fricative or stop. Now, ain normally in modern standard Arabic and Arabic dialects is more like a fricative or approximant sound. If you want me to talk a little more about phonetic details. But apparently in classical Arabic it could become a stop under certain conditions, such as gemination, doubling. So if you look at, for example, the second verb stem, today you would say fa'ala. Apparently in Sibawayh's time it was more like fa'ala. So the same place of articulation, but it stops. The articulatory system creates a closure, fa'ala. Okay, and yeah, the place of articulation is normally given as pharyngeal, but pharyngeal stops, I think, are phonetically impossible. So it could be, and I think there are some experiments proving that actually some Arabic speakers do this, but it could be more epiglottal than pharyngeal, if you know what these phonetic details mean. Okay, yeah, but so just to tell you, this sound was probably epiglottal rather than pharyngeal, and it became a stop under certain conditions, just as gemination. And then we have lam, nun, mim, ra, waw, ya, and alif. They don't fit into those categories, and yeah, obviously these aren't obstruents. These are like liquids, nasals, etc. So this is one other way how Sibawayh categorizes letters. Alright, and the third way of distinguishing between different letters, according to Sibawayh, is something that is very well known to happen in Semitic and other Afro-Asiatic languages, namely emphatic versus non-emphatic. So emphatic versus non-emphatic, what he calls mutaqa and munfatiha. Basically in Arabic it means pharyngealization or velarization, and Sibawayh says that those emphatic consonants, at least 3 of them, have non-emphatic counterparts. So for example, ta has the non-emphatic counterpart dal, according to him, which might be surprising because if you learn Arabic today, the teacher will probably tell you that the non-emphatic counterpart of ta is ta. But because he sees them both as voiced, or maybe ta was in fact voiced, he sees these two as emphatic and non-emphatic counterpart. Maybe it was da, so da versus da. Okay, the next two are pretty obvious. Sa versus sa, or sod versus sin, and dha versus dal. And dad, again, a modern Arabic teacher will tell you that dad has the non-emphatic counterpart dal, but this isn't true in Sibawayh, his classical Arabic, because dad wasn't pronounced dad. And he says, and if there was no emphasis, ta would become dal, sad would become sin, dha would become dal, and dad would disappear from speech because there is no other letter at that place of articulation, which seems to be true in his Arabic, or in the Arabic of the 8th century, which is the point why I make this video. I want to show you what Arabic sounded back then. Alright, I think we are good now to look at the alphabet, just letter by letter. I didn't categorize them into certain categories like first the stops and then the fricatives. I just go over this letter by letter, starting with the first letter of the Arabic alphabet, Alif. So I've got these charts here for every letter. You can see the letter shape in Arabic, the usual transliteration, the name also in transliteration, and then pronunciation. I have Old Hejazi, which is pre-8th century, classical Arabic of the 8th century, and then some information on modern standard Arabic. And the Old Hejazi information is sometimes a little vague. You can just like guess on the basis of comparative Semitics. And then for classical Arabic, we have the Kitab Sibawayh as a source, his descriptions. And for modern Arabic, we have like millions of people who speak it. You can watch Al Jazeera and see what it sounds like. Okay. And then I've got examples that usually reflect the different ways of pronouncing this in classical Arabic of the 8th century. So first example, Nas. This is like the normal, like the default pronunciation, Nas. And then we have Malik, where the kasra, the short e vowel, triggers this thing called imala. It's kind of like a Germanic umlaut. So the Sibawayh puts it, the alif is leaning towards the kasra. Malik, not quite sure how exactly he meant this to be pronounced, maybe more like Malik. And I've heard some people say that if you pronounce Arabic like this, it would sound very Lebanese. So apparently, as if people said Lebanon instead of Lubnan. Okay? Yeah, so this is Malik or Malik, something like that. Then there's something that I note that I mentioned briefly before. There's this thing he calls the emphatic Hijazi Alif, which is permissible when reading the Quran or poetry, according to Sibawayh. So the word for life, you can say Hayah with imala because of the ya, Hayah. But it seems like it's also permissible to say Hayoh, because this was originally in Old Hejazi Arabic an O sound, still written with Wow, and it's permissible according to Sibawayh to say Hayoh. Okay? And finally we have Qala. Here the Alif sounds a little darker. It's a little backed, a backed vowel because of the Qaf, because it's adjacent to an emphatic consonant. So don't say Qala, you say Qala. Alright, this still applies to modern standard Arabic. Second letter, there's not a lot to say, and you see pronunciation. There's really not a lot to say. It's just a B sound. The letter is called ba, and my example is barq. Okay, that's it. That's the letter ba. Also this one, ta. There's not a lot you can say. Ta. It's a T sound, always has been. Tilka. And also the next one is just a voiceless interdental fricative, tha. So the letter is called tha, and you find it in words like thamarat. Thamarat. This one is maybe a little more interesting. So in modern standard Arabic you would call it jim, j, even though in some dialects like in Masri, somebody from Cairo would say gim, and many people across the Arab world would say more like jim. But it seems like the pronunciation that is considered most standard is j, jim. Though in classical Arabic, I've mentioned this briefly, it was just like a palatal voice stop, so it was more like y, yim. It's not quite clear what this was in Old Hejazi. It may have been the same as in classical. Maybe it was a g sound that was then retained in Egyptian, gim. So maybe this word, this example in Old Hejazi was pronounced ganna. Okay, not quite sure about this, but in classical Arabic, the correct pronunciation according to Sibawayh should be janna. Janna. Oh, and by the way, these examples here on the alphabet charts are without the tanween and the i'rab, so like the pausal form. Okay, so the context form could be jannatun, al jannatu, something like that. But I'm giving you the so-called pausal forms here, so like omitting those final vowels and pronouncing the ta marbuta as a ha, and so you get janna. Yeah, the next letter also not very spectacular, apart from the fact that the place of articulation could be pharyngeal, could be epiglottal, just like the ayin that I've mentioned before. And it seems like for some speakers today it is more of an epiglottal consonant. I'll use the transcription symbol for pharyngeals, so this word would be hijara. Hijara. Yeah, the next one, also not a lot to say. This is ha, like a uvular voice. It's fricative, like this word, khalifa. Okay, and this doesn't mean Mia Khalifa, but this is like the caliph, khalifa. The next one, also, you see many of these consonants are very straightforward, and there hasn't been any diachronic change that needs to be pointed out, and the pronunciation of some is very straightforward. So this is dal, just like a D, as in the word dirasa. And the next one, also not a lot to talk about, a voiced interdental fricative the letter is called zal, and the example here is dhalika. Okay, do you see the imala here because of the kasra? Dhalika, or maybe dhalika, not quite sure, but definitely had some kind of imala or imele. Yeah, now the next one is the trill. It may have just been some kind of r in Old Hejazi Arabic. Classical and modern Arabic, we have a normal and an emphatic version, which has to do with the vowels around this letter. So, for example, this word, the word for letter, risala, it is non-emphatic because it's followed by kasra. But the other example, messenger, rasul. So here the ra is emphatic because it's followed by fatha. Alright, so this is one of the rules concerning the letter Ra, and yeah, you can't really tell whether this existed in Old Hejazi Arabic. There's so far no real way to find out, I think. Alright, so the next letter is Sin, which in classical as in modern Arabic has just been a plain S sound. Sin as in Salam. It may have been maybe more like a Sheen sound in Old Hejazi Arabic, similar to Northwest Semitic, where you say Shalama or Shalom, but I found this mentioned in the literature, but you can't really tell, and I don't know if it's necessary, because there's also some debate whether this has been a Sheen sound or a Seen sound in Proto-Semitic. If it had been a Sheen sound in Proto-Semitic, it must have shifted at some point, and then the question is, did it do so before Old Hejazi or during Old Hejazi? I wouldn't think too much about this. Okay, what's important for this video is that in classical Arabic it is seen. Now this one gets a little more interesting. From modern standard Arabic you know this as sheen. Now for classical Arabic, first of all, the point of articulation is not quite clear, because Sibawayh describes it as being pronounced at the same point of articulation as Jim and Ya, which means palatal, like this one. So you would say Hin, okay, like the German Ich sound, Hin. But I don't really buy that, because Sheen is a sun letter, even in classical Arabic, so it means Al assimilates, and it doesn't do the same thing with Jim and Ya. So why would there be a difference? So I think it was, at that point, it was Sheen, just as it is today, Sheen. So you should say things like Sharab, Sharab. What it did have, according to Sibawayh, is a voiced version, J, in certain environments. So this word, according to Sibawayh, should be pronounced Ajdaq. Not Ashdaq, but Ajdaq. So it's voiced because of the following dal. Old Hejazi, who knows? Maybe Sheen, maybe it was lateral, as in Proto-Semitic. Maybe it was palatal at some point, as a result of shift from this to this. Who knows? Next one is the emphatic S. So Sod, modern standard Arabic, no problem, just a pharyngealized S, Sa. Classical Arabic, there also was a voice counterpart after what Sibawayh wrote. So you would say, for example, Sirat. Okay, that's not a problem, just the plain voiceless Sod, Sirat. But if it's before Dal, for example, you would say Yazdur. Okay, Yazdur, Asdiqa, and things like that. Old Hejazi Arabic, again, some speculation. It may have been an affricate at some point. I think there are some who say it was an affricate. It may have been affricate in classical Arabic, but I don't really see a reason to assume that, and I don't see any evidence in Sibawayh for that. So if we focus on classical Arabic, in the 8th century, it was either this or that, depending on the phonological environment. Now, finally, my favorite, the most interesting one. In modern standard Arabic, it's boring. It's just an emphatic D, da, da, dad. Now, in classical Arabic, what does Sibawayh say? First of all, he says it's emphatic. Okay, it still is in modern standard Arabic. He says it's a fricative, which dad clearly isn't. This is not a continuous sound, this is a stop sound. Okay, what kind of fricative? He also describes the place of articulation in great detail, and tells us that it is pronounced, to make it short, with the sides of the tongue. So this hints at a lateral fricative, And this would be quite vague if this sound didn't exist in other Semitic languages, even living ones like modern South Arabian languages like Mehri. I think Shahri has this. I think Suqadri has this. So in modern South Arabian languages, we have this sound, and this pretty much confirms what Semiticists have assumed for a long time based on Sibawayh's writings, that this was a pharyngealized, lateral, voiced, fricative ja. Ja. Very unique sound, very complicated, and several grammarians, I think, also commented on this, saying that this is the hardest sound for foreigners to learn, which is why Arabic is Lughat al-Dad or Lughat al-Jad, the language of this letter, of this very strange sound. So we have words like these, and this would be in 8th century classical Arabic, would be Jalal. Jalal. Okay? In Old Hejazi, it may have been voiceless, Sha, okay, but again, that is speculation. What we have solid evidence for is this Sibawayh, 8th century, Jalal. Okay, the next one is the emphatic counterpart of ta, modern standard Arabic or modern pronunciation ta. Again, the classical pronunciation may have been voiced because of Sibawayh's categorization, so maybe more like da. Okay, but we also maybe don't understand him right, and he actually meant that this is da, it's just not aspirated, like the ta, where you feel a puff of air. Okay, and Old Hejazi, who knows, something similar. And this word, I guess, should be pronounced, well, just like in modern standard Arabic, tifl. And next, one other, and this is basically the final emphatic letter, the emphatic interdental, the, may have been voiceless in Old Hejazi, the, but classical it's voiced, so the as in dhahr. The next one is Rein. I've already talked about this a little, so it seems like it had this stop allophone, for example, when it's geminated, so you say things like Abid, but this word would be Su'irat. Su'irat. It becomes a stop. Next one is the Ghain. Nothing special to say about this. The example is Ghalab. Next one is Fa. Example is Fath. This may have been a stop in Old Hejazi Arabic. It was a stop in Proto-Semitic apparently, and at some point it became Fa in the history of Arabic. You just can't really tell when this happened, so maybe in Old Hejazi this would have been Path, but maybe it was already had become a fricative, so Fath would also be the correct pronunciation of Old Hejazi. Again, speculation. Classical Arabic definitely an F. Fath. Now we have the qaf, which may have been voiced in classical Arabic, qa, and I mean it is voiced in some dialects, like some dialects pronounce it like ga. Okay, so yeah, but I'd go with the idea that this probably sounded like this was voiceless. So qamar, just categorized as unaspirated by Sibawayh. But I think it's correct to say qamar in classical Arabic of the 8th century. The next one is not very spectacular. Ka, letter is called kaf. My example here is kitab. Also, the lam looks simple, though there are some things you could say. You might know that in modern standard Arabic there are two ways of saying lam. One is just the plain L, and the other way is the emphatic la that you only have in one word, maybe the Arabic word for God, Allah. Allah. There is no mention whatsoever of this in the Kitab Sibawayh, as far as I know, which I guess this leaves two possibilities. One, it didn't exist, and they actually said Allah, like some first semester Arabic student, or maybe he just didn't find it necessary to point it out, which is strange because he pointed out a lot of different things. So I don't know, how did they say God in the 8th century? Did they say Allah? Did they say Allah? Can't really tell. Okay? But in all other words you find just this plain L pronunciation, like in libes. Another letter where you can't say much, the name is Mim, the pronunciation is like an M, so you have the example here, Malik. Nun is a little more interesting in classical Arabic than it is in modern standard Arabic, because sometimes it merely represents nasalization. So it can be just an N sound, like in the word nudium, but the word for a human being, man, would have been pronounced insan in classical Arabic and not insan as in modern standard Arabic. Old Hejazi, did Old Hejazi do this nasalization thing again as well? I don't think so, but we can't tell for sure. We're almost done with the alphabet. This is Ha, just a plain Ha, H kind of sound, just like English H, for example, Hoa. Next letter is Wow, and this can be either read as a consonant or a vowel. Consonant W, okay, in all those periods of Arabic the same, or as a long vowel U. In Old Hejazi, it could also be read O, and in classical Arabic, it also sometimes had imala, which means it sounded more like maybe or something like that. Not quite sure how fronted it was. Probably not as much as but yeah, apparently there was a difference between and something else that appeared in the environment of kasra and ya. Okay, this twofold pronunciation doesn't seem to exist in modern standard Arabic. At least I've never seen anybody teach it like that. So some examples: as a consonant, w, walid; as a vowel, qulub, qulub; and yeah, maybe this, because of the imala, would be more like nudia, not nudia, but nudia, nudia. Nudia is probably too much, but yeah, not quite like the plain U vowel. Modern Standard Arabic, I guess you would say Nudia, but seems like this hasn't been the case in classical Arabic in the 8th century. And we've reached the final letter, which has two forms. Basically, it's called Ya, but it has like this subform called Alif Maqsura without the dots. Also, like wow, this can be either a consonant pronounced ya in all eras of Arabic, or two different vowels, either e or a. So this is just the transliteration. The pronunciation is a different case. So in Old Hejazi, it was either e or e. Classical, more or less the same. I'm just not sure whether it was really e or more like e. And in modern standard Arabic, when it's the alif maqsura, it's more like a or a in the surrounding of emphatic consonants. Okay, let me give you some classic Arabic examples. You have the consonant here, yamin, and here you have it representing the a sound. قسوة. قسوة. So this is an alif maqsura, not a proper ya. قسوة. This is an extra alphabetic sign. It is not a letter per se. It's called Hamza. And it was invented because the alif, well, alif in other Semitic languages very often was used to write the glottal stop, but it had lost that function in the original Arabic script, so another sign to write the glottal stop has been invented, which is called Hamza. Transliteration is an apostrophe. And, well, it's a glottal stop, though in classical Arabic it also had this, the medial Hamza pronunciation, which was weakened and probably partly voiced. So we see it here at the beginning of a word, ab. Okay, solid glottal stop, ab. But between two vowels, according to Sibawayh, it's a medial Hamza, which probably sounded more like ha, bais. Okay, not a solid glottal stop like bais, which you would say in modern standard Arabic, bais, but more like a voiced ha sound, bais, bais. Not quite sure, but it's somehow weaker than the actual Hamza. Alright, this is one extra letter or an extra alphabetical sign called the ta marbuta, the connected ta, bound ta, which is basically ha with two dots added above, because many words, especially feminine nouns and feminine adjectives in Old Hejazi Arabic, ended in ah, which the scribes wrote with ha, and then came the grammarians and said, no, but this has to be at, but we cannot just erase the ha from the sacred text, so let's just put the two dots of the ta above, and thus this new letter was created, which can be, it depends on the context, can be at or a. So I didn't give you the Old Hejazi pronunciation because this letter didn't exist. In Old Hejazi you would have the ha in this place, but in classical Arabic you have words like malahika. Malahika. This is without an ending, without like a inflectional ending. If you added an inflectional ending like this would become at, and you would say things like malahikatun, malahikatun. Okay, and that's the main gist of the ta marbuta. Now these are the main three signs for short vowels that were invented by Arab grammarians. They are called fatha, kasra, and dhamma, and they represent short a, i, u, with all the variation that you have, especially classical Arabic. There's imala, there are emphatic consonants that cause this to be more of a back vowel. Same for the kasra, and also the dhamma can be influenced by emphatic vowels and can be influenced by imala. In modern pronunciation, modern standard Arabic, it's more or less the same. Just again, this imala of u doesn't seem to exist, or it is just not recognized as a thing that exists in phonology. Alright, these are three extra signs called the tanween signs, tanween bil fath, tanween bil kasr, tanween bil dam. They're pronounced an, in, un, with all the variations that you can get. Okay, the vowels can be colored differently. The n component can just be nasalization, but the main point of this was that an, in, un were inflectional endings in classical Arabic, what the grammarians thought is proper classical Arabic, but it didn't exist in the Hijazi dialect, so they weren't written. Okay, normally if a word ended in an, in, or un, you would write a nun, but because these endings didn't exist, they weren't written at all in the Quranic consonant text, which is why the grammarians, they said, okay, this isn't just kitab, this is kitabun, but we cannot add the nun, so we just add this tanween bidam, this like double dhamma sign. Some other signs, there's also this sign called sukun, which basically just means that there's no vowel following the consonant upon which this is written. In addition, in classical Arabic, it isn't just silent, but sometimes there's this thing called qalqala, where like a short schwa vowel is inserted. So you could say that this sukun basically also represents the qalqala. And this sign is called shadda. And shadda, actually the word shadda is written with a shadda because it symbolizes gemination. So a consonant is doubled. Shadda, kuttab, etc. Okay, now let's come to the more what I find to be the interesting parts of Sibawayh's description of Arabic phonology. The first thing that I found super interesting are what he calls the derived letters. There are derived letters that are commendable when reciting the Quran or poetry, and some derived letters that are discommendable. And especially here, he seems to describe a certain manner of pronouncing the Quran and poetry that apparently differs from what you heard on the street, because why else should he point this out? So there are 6 so-called derived letters that he finds commendable, namely what he calls the light nun, which is nasalization, the medial hamza, the alif inclined towards ya, which is imala, sheen pronounced like jim, sad pronounced like zai, and the so-called emphatic Hijazi alif. First of all, nasalization means that nun is not pronounced as a full consonant, but just nasalizes the preceding vowel. And I'm comparing all of these to modern standard Arabic pronunciation. So in modern standard Arabic, you would say antum, but in classical Arabic, according to Sibawayh, you would say antum, antum, not an, but an. Okay, it's a nasalized vowel, antum. And I've mentioned tajweed before, but also you find this in tajweed when people recite the Quran. The second thing that I find difficult to pronounce is the so-called medial hamza, which is, as he says, when hamza is between 2 vowels. So this word, like he asked in modern standard Arabic, you would say sa'ala. Okay, there's a hamza here, sa'ala. But according to Sibawayh, it seems like this should be more like sala. So almost like in dialects where you don't have the hamza at all, but there still must be some kind of sound between those 2 fathas, but it's weaker than the normal hamza. So I've seen this in an article on classical Arabic phonology being interpreted as being like a voiced glottal fricative, sala, sala. I find this hard to pronounce, but apparently this is what Sibawayh means. The other thing that he mentions is the alif inclined towards ya, which is imala. So and I've listened to some Arabic news, etc. And apparently this isn't done in modern standard Arabic, and people on like news anchors, etc. would say things like Malik, but it seems like according to Sibawayh, the correct pronunciation is more like Malik, or maybe even Malik, which would, as I said before, sound Lebanese to some Arabic speakers. Malik. This is Imala. The other thing he mentions, sheen pronounced like jim, probably means voiced. So this is his example. Modern standard Arabic would be more like ashdaq, but according to Sibawayh, it seems like you're supposed to say ajdaq. Ajdaq. Alright? Same thing, sad pronounced like zai, meaning voiced. So instead of the modern pronunciation masdar, you're supposed to say masdar. Masdar. So it becomes voiced because of the following voiced stop. The final thing that I've also mentioned before, emphatic Hijazi Alif. So instead of Hayya, you can say Hayyo. So this is permissible according to Sibawayh when reciting the Quran or poetry to say Hayyo, or maybe even more like Hayyo, Hayyo, just like in Old Hejazi Arabic. Now there are also 8 derived letters that are discommendable. I'm not quite sure what he means by pointing these out, but it seems like at least some of them are some kind of dialectal variation. So one thing he mentions is kaf between jim and poor kaf, and I think this may be something like what you hear in Iraq, for example, or from some Palestinians. So instead of kitab, which would be preferred, apparently some people back then said chitab, something like that. And Sibawayh discommends this. Don't do this. Don't say chitab when you recite the Quran or poetry. Jim pronounced like kaf. My guess is that he means something like saying ganna instead of janna. So similar to urban Egyptian Arabic. He mentions jim pronounced like sheen. Maybe this is janna, like modern Levantine pronunciation, janna. He also mentions weak dod, and I can imagine that many people had trouble to pronounce dod. Maybe this is also directed at foreign learners of Arabic that are struggling with some of these sounds. So instead of the preferred zalal, maybe some people said dhalal or something like that, which you shouldn't. Then we have sad, pronounced like seen. I wasn't quite sure, but maybe it's just that some people couldn't pronounce the emphasis. So instead of ashab, they said ashab with an S, with seen. Okay. He also mentions ta, pronounced like ta. Maybe the same thing, no emphasis. So instead of tayyibat, people said tayyibat. And then he says dha, pronounced like tha, which could mean lack of emphasis as well. But why doesn't he say dha, pronounced like thal, which is what you would expect? Maybe it means there were some old Arabic dialects where the dha was voiceless. So instead of dhalim, some people said instead of dhalim, some people said thalim, with a voiceless kind of tha sound. Maybe this is what he meant, and again, a dialectal feature that he says isn't correct. And finally, ba, pronounced like fa. I could imagine that this is something like people saying katabtu, because the recommended pronunciation by Sibawayh would be katabtu, so the B needs to be voiced, and there's also qalqala between katabtu. Yeah, maybe some people said katabtu. Not sure about this one, or maybe this is some kind of foreign thing. Yeah, but these are my interpretations of what he calls like kaf between jim and pure kaf, jim pronounced like kaf, etc. Now come some of the extra features of proper classical Arabic pronunciation according to Sibawayh. One thing is called qalqala, which means that the sukun is realized as some kind of schwa sound, maybe emphatic, non-emphatic, no, the other way around, non-emphatic, emphatic, after unaspirated or voice stops, after the stops qaf, jim, ta, dal, and ba, which, as far as I know, is also part of tajweed. I've got examples here. This should be aqrab, mujrim, nutfa, udwan, and subhan. Okay, so you notice there should always be this qalqala, short vowel, non-syllabic vowel. So instead of subhan, you should say subhan, according to Sibawayh. Now comes the most complex part, I think, of Sibawayh's description of Arabic phonology, and I shortened this drastically when I made these PowerPoints, when I finalized it, because he talks about assimilation a lot. And there's lots and lots of assimilation rules that I've never heard before learning Arabic. I've made an overview. Maybe I don't need to comment on every single one of them, but you can see, according to Sibawayh, a lot of letters, when they are directly adjacent to each other, become something else. And I find some of them really interesting because, for example, uh, ayn and ha are supposed to become a geminated ha, which means that, for example, for ma'had, like institute ma'had, you're supposed to say mahad, which sounds super odd. And I'm not sure whether this is still something that he says is recommended when reciting the Quran and poetry, or because this is also something that he does, or this is something simply that Arabs do. Okay, so maybe this section is more like how do people speak. Okay, not quite sure about Sibawayh's intentions here. Also, not quite sure if we understand him correctly. Also, not quite sure whether he really was as good as we think. Yeah, but just to point this out, so for example, Ein Ha should be Ah. So instead of Ma'had, Mahad. And some of them I tried to find examples, but for some of them you don't really find a lot of examples. So really rare occurrences. Um, yeah, but there's a lot more that he says concerning assimilation. I made a couple of slides on that, but didn't want to exaggerate. Now, assimilation rules of Noon. This is also where the nasalization comes to play. And you see, this is quite complex, but this is pretty similar to the modern tajweed rules for the Quran. So, for example, Noon plus laryngeals, which means Noon Ha, Noon Ain, Noon Ha, Noon Hamza, nothing happens, no assimilation. But for example, Noon plus liquids or glides means gemination. So Noon Lam becomes geminated Lam, Noon Ra becomes geminated Ra, etc. Okay, and then you have the rest. So Noon plus Ta, Tha, Jim, Dal, Dal, etc. means nasalization, which means, like you say, Antum, and for example, Insan, and things like that. Okay, I don't want to comment on all of them in detail, but you can see, and yeah, you can just see what he meant. This part I found interesting, assimilation rules of lam, because there's one thing that everybody who learns Arabic knows, and one thing that was new to me. The first thing, the article al. Everybody who learns Arabic in the first semester, you learn the difference between huruf shamsiya, huruf qamariya, sun letters and moon letters, which means to certain consonants, the lam of the article al is completely assimilated. This happens, for example, with sheen. So al and shams becomes ash-shams. All right. This happens with ra's, with the letter ra. So al and ra's becomes ar-ra's. Okay. Or for example, the letter dal, like for example, dhahab, you say adh-dhahab. Okay, and with all other letters you don't assimilate, al-kalb, al-qamar, etc. Now what I find interesting, according to Sibawayh, this also happens or is supposed to happen. Again, I'm not sure about his intentions here, but with other grammatical words. Grammatical words ending in lam. For example, hal, which you use for questions. Hal. And there are different grades. So some assimilations are very good, some are acceptable, acceptable but not good, acceptable but even less good, and unpleasant. So it seems like hal and other grammatical words ending in lam, it is very good if you assimilate them to ra. So if I wanted to ask somebody, did you see? In modern standard Arabic, the way I learned it, you would say هل رأيت. But apparently to Sibawayh, it's very good to say هل رأيت. Okay, with assimilation, هل رأيت, which to me sounds new or unusual, but yeah, apparently. And to some letters it's acceptable but not good. To N it's unpleasant. So hal and noon, did he sleep? Hal nam. Apparently it's unpleasant to say hannam, but maybe some people did, because why else should he point it out? Hannam, no, don't say hannam, say hal nam, and things like that. Hal nimta, etc. Okay? Yeah, these are just some other assimilation rules that I found interesting enough to include them to this presentation. Some info on imala. On imala, it's very important to know when to do it, and I just wrote down the rules. So, when does a or a become e or e? It's in proximity with kasra, which means, yeah, you see long a consonant e, short a consonant e consonant long a, etc. So in a linguistic manner, I've written down the rules when the a vowels are inclined towards front vowels. Okay. One rule is also that a final a is only affected in pausa, like at the end of a phrase. So this you would pronounce yajribha, but when there's something else following, you would say yajribha zaydun. So it only becomes when at the end of a phrase. If a represents a root consonant waw or ya, it's always a. So like asha, afe, ba'a, etc. Okay. Contact with ghain, kha, qaf, dad, ta, sa, dha prevents imala. It's the same thing in modern standard Arabic. All of these are emphatic or somehow similar to emphatic consonants and prevent imala, and the alif becomes more like a. Okay, and also ra can be emphatic in some environments, and thus in these contexts imala is blocked. Okay, it's very complex, but it also kind of makes sense, and it kind of also survived to the present day. All right, and this is the imala of u vowels, so dhamma and waw, and this is treated very briefly, and apparently it is much more limited than the alif or fatha imala. So he basically just gives these two contexts, like waw or dhamma before consonant which is followed by kasra. I think logically this should also apply to when the consonant is followed by ya, but he doesn't explicitly mention it. And the pronunciation is somewhat fronted, not sure how much, but instead of oo, more like oo or something like that. Probably not as much as a German or French oo kind of vowel. All right, we made it. We made it through the alphabet and all the extra explanations. I tried to keep this short, but I see this video is at this point almost 2 hours long. Yeah, what I'll do now is read a couple of texts for you, just to demonstrate a couple of things. I'll explain a couple of things while I show you the individual lines of the text, but I don't want to do this too extensively, so you can just enjoy hearing me reading some lines in classical Arabic and Old Hejazi and Middle Arabic, just based on my findings in phonology. So first thing is Old Hejazi Arabic, the language that is reflected in the Quranic consonant text. So here you see the first line. Let me see. I don't know if there's anything here I need to point out. You see it's without vowel signs, without dots. And there's some things that I don't know, or that we linguists don't really know, like min, Was there a short vowel following? Was it minhu? Or was the vowel clipped off? Was it min? So some things are uncertain, but in principle this should sound something like. And I put my laser pointer on the transliteration because maybe not everybody can read this. So wa yasalunaka an dhil qarnayn qul satlu alaykum min dhikra. Okay, that's basically it. You see at least one indeterminate accusative ending, dhikra. Of course, this should be dhikran. But even I think when you recite the Quran, because it's at the end of the phrase, even then you would say dhikra. Correct me if I'm wrong. But here it should probably, in any case, be read dhikra. Okay, let me show you the next line. Alright, so the next line. Inna makanna lah fi al-ard wa atayna min kull shay sababa. Okay, and again we have this ending here, and it rhymes to the line before. Okay, so it's Inna makanna lah fi al-ard wa atayna min kull shay sababa. This line is a little shorter. Fatba' sababa. He traveled on a certain road. Fatba' sababa. Okay, you probably said fatba', not fa'atba', because there was no hamza at the beginning of words, it seems. Fatba' sababa. Yeah, this one is a little longer, and we have some interesting things here, like the first word ends in e, hatti, which later became hatta in standard Arabic or in classical Arabic. Alright, let me read this. حتى إذا بلغ مغرب الشمس وجدها تغرب في عين حمية ووجد عندها قوما قلنا يا ذا القرنين إما أن تعذب وإما أن تتخذ فيهم حسنا. Okay, it's a little difficult to read it like that. It's not really intuitive, and I haven't practiced reading this Old Hejazi pronunciation a lot, but it's just to give you the idea. Alright? قال لما من ظلم فسوف نعذبه ثم يرد إلى ربه فيعذبه عذابا نكرا. وأما من آمن وعمل صالحا فله جزاء الحسن وسنقول له من أمرنا يسرا. Okay, here you see an example for glottal stop because it's after word final long a, jaza. Okay, you see it written here. Doesn't really look like jaza if you're unfamiliar with unpointed Arabic, but that's it. Jaza al-husni wa sanaqul lah min amrina yusra. Thumma atba' sababa. Thumma atba' sababa. You probably need to kind of contract those words together. Thumma atba' sababa. حتى إذا بلغ مطلع الشمس وجدها تطلع على قوم لم نجعل لهم من دونها سترا. You also, I didn't point that out, but the al is probably not assimilated, so it's al-shams and probably not ash-shams. مطلع الشمس وجدها تطلع على قوم لم نجعل لهم من دونها سترا. كذلك وقد أحطنا بما لديه خبرة. Okay, again here, not quite sure whether maybe it should be لديه or maybe لديه, maybe just لديه. Okay, كذلك وقد أحطنا بما لديه خبرة. And I'm done with Old Hejazi Arabic, which means now we can move on to Classical Arabic, which is easier to read because we have the vowels. Even if they're not written, we know the vowels because we know Classical Arabic. Okay, Classical Arabic in this video has two parts. First part is prose, second part is poetry or verse. Okay, but let me start with prose. Now, when I practiced reading this a little and like rehearsed this, I tried to apply all of Sibawayh's rules to Classical Arabic prose, and I find it super difficult to pronounce it like that. It came off as super unnatural. And then I tried the same thing with poetry, and it was much easier. Which gives me the idea that these recommended pronunciation rules were, and he mentions this, it's recommended for the Quran and poetry. I think they were only applied to the Quran and poetry. For prose, I don't know if anybody spoke like that, but it just feels super unnatural and complicated to apply those phonological rules to prose. So, when reading Classical Arabic prose, I will not apply all of Sibawayh's rules. I will only pay attention to like the original pronunciation of the consonants, like saying ja instead of da. But I will do it without the qalqala and the nasalization and things, because as I said, it just doesn't flow. Okay, so this is a sample text of Classical Arabic prose, as classical as it seems to make sense to me. Alright, so the first line, and I don't think I need to point anything out. So first line, ذكر من قال ذلك. Those who said this. And let me also read the English, because what I've chosen here, it's from I think it's called the Tarikh al-Rusul wal-Muluk by Tabari, and it's kind of an account of the creation of the world, but there are some things that I found surprising in terms of content, not in terms of language, but I found the content very interesting. So let me read the Arabic and the English, and I think I don't need to point out a lot of things here. ذكر من قال ذلك. Those who said this. Alright, so حدثنا القاسم بن الحسن قال حدثنا الحسين بن داود قال حدثنا مبشر الحلبي عن نرطاة بن المنذر قال سمعت الجمرة يقول. So this is just like the line of tradition, how at-Tabari, how what he is about to narrate came down to him. So and so told us, so and so told us. He said, I heard so and so saying. Okay, just a chain of transmitters. And now comes the extra content. إن الله خلق القلم فكتب به ما هو خالق وما هو كائن من خلقه. So God created the pen, and then he wrote down with it whatever he was creating, and all, I think this is a typo, should be his, and all his creation. Let me see, خلقه, all his creation, that was going to be. Next line. ثم إن ذلك الكتاب سبح الله ومجده 1000 عام قبل أن يخلق شيئا من الخلق. So this writing then praised and glorified God for 1,000 years before he created anything else in his creation. So let's go on. فلما أراد جل جلاله خلق السماوات والأرض خلق فيما ذكر أياما ستة فسمى كل يوم منهن باسم غير الذي سمى به الآخر. Then God wanted to create the heavens and the earth. He reportedly created 6 days and called every one of them by a different name. Okay, so the first thing God created was a pen. He wrote down his creations, and then he created 6 days and named them. And as if this creation account wasn't interesting enough, just wait for what he called the 6 days, because he didn't just call them Al-Ahad, Al-Ithnain, Al-Thulatha. Okay, so see this on the next slide. I think the next slide. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so وقيل إن اسم أحد تلك الأيام الستة أبجد واسم الآخر منهن هوز واسم الثالث منهن حطي واسم الرابع منهن كلما واسم الخامس منهن سعفص واسم السادس منهن قرشت. Okay, so the name of one of those days reportedly is Abjad or Alif Ba Jim Dal, that of another Ha Waw Zai, that of the third Ha Ta Ya, that of the fourth Kaf Lam Mim Nun, that of the fifth Sin Ain Fa Sad, and that of the sixth Qaf Ra Shin Ta. So what do you see here? He apparently didn't just create 6 days in this account, but also the original Semitic consonant alphabet, the Phoenician alphabet, which I find super interesting to see. Why did At-Tabari write it like this? Where did this tradition come from? Just super interesting stuff. Now it goes on, some more narration. ذكر من قال ذلك. Those who said this. And next is another like chain of tradition. حدثني الحضرمي قال حدثنا مصرف بن عمرو اليامي حدثنا حفص بن غياث عن العلاء بن المسيب عن رجل من كندة قال سمعت الضحاك بن مزاحم يقول. So and so told us, so and so told us. Okay, now what did they tell him? What came down to him? And again he says the same thing, just a little different. خلق الله السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام ليس منها يوم إلا له اسم أبجد هوز حطي كلما سعفص قرشت. So God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. There's no day that doesn't have a name. And then Abjad, Hawaz, Hatti, Kalam, and Sa'fas, and Qarashat are the names. And that's it. So that was some classical Arabic prose. I did my best to get the original Zod right, but it's just a hell of a complicated letter to pronounce, especially if you're trying to pronounce it in like fluent speech, like reading a complete text and not just isolated examples. Okay, now Arabic poetry here, I will actually try to apply more of Sibawayh's rules, like the qalqala and the nasalization and the imala and things like that. And just to remind myself, I also changed the transliteration accordingly. So yeah, let me, I'm the one speaking here, let me try this. Classical Arabic poetry as pronounced as good as I can in the 8th century. And some of you might know this poem, but it's just the beginning because some poems are super long. So first, like hemistick or two hemistics. I just don't remember. Do you call both a hemistick or the whole thing? Anyhow, see my transliteration with the imala marked with the qalqala, nasalization. So, قف نبكي من ذكرى حبيب ومنزلي بسقط اللوى بين الدخول فحوملي. And poems are difficult to translate, but I found this translation to be okay. Let's stop and cry over the memory of a lover, and the place and the drop of the valley between Dakhul and Haumal. Next part, and here also to remind myself that this is Ja. So let me see if I get this right. Fatuljiha. Okay, again. Fatuljiha falmiqrati lam ya'fu rasmuha. Probably shouldn't take breaks because it's poetry. Fatuljiha falmiqrati lam ya'fu rasmuha. لما نسجتها من جنوب وشمالي. And the Tawdih and Miqrat, its traces haven't been wiped out from what weaved them back and forth of the south and northern winds. Okay, next line or part. ترى بعر الأرآم في عرصاتها وقيعانها كأنه حب فلفل. Look at the antelope dropping on its alleys, its tracts, like the seeds of pepper. So it goes on. كأني غداة البين يوم تحملوا لدى سمرات الحي ناقف حنظلي. And if it's only been a morning since the day they departed, and I'm at a nearby thorn tree splitting desert gourds. Okay, and here nasalization. Now we got that part right. حنظلي لدى سمرات الحي ناقف حنظلي. Okay, let me do one more. وقوفا بها سحبي علي مطيهم يقولون لا تهلك أسو وتجملي. Right, so some things to keep in mind here. For example, this is وقوفا, but before the ba it becomes وقوفا بها. Okay, and the same thing here. You have asan, but before wow it becomes أسو وتجملي. I'm almost done. وإن شفائي عبرة محراقة فهل عند رسم دارس من معولي. But my healing is a matter of spilling tears, so is there a trace here from a reliable artist? There's a lot of assimilation going on there. So you see, for example, this line you have rasmin and darisin and min, but it becomes rasmin darisim min muawwali. Okay, so rasmin becomes rasmin because it's followed by dal. Darisin becomes darisim because it's followed by min, and min becomes mim because it's followed by muawwali. Okay, فهل عند رسم دارس من معولي. Oh, and I'm done with the classical Arabic poetry. Probably sounded horrible, but the point was just to show you a couple of the features and just do my best to pronounce it according to the old rules of Sibawayh. Now what I also want to show you is a couple of text samples in Middle Arabic. Middle Arabic is a term that is used for like texts, so talking about literature, not actual spoken Arabic, but texts that show a mix of classical Arabic and dialects. So there are lots of Middle Arabic texts that were produced throughout Arab history because sometimes scribes just didn't really know classical Arabic well, but spoke Arabic, but of course spoke some kind of Arabic dialect. And this very often you see, the first sample is Jewish Middle Arabic. This often concerned non-Muslim religious groups living in Arabic-speaking countries, because Jews and Christians, for example, didn't have the same access to education or to learning classical Arabic, because classical Arabic was normally taught in Islamic schools to be able to read the Quran, whereas Jewish people, even when they spoke Arabic, were educated to read Jewish literature, to read the Tanakh, the Torah, etc. And Christians were educated to read the Bible, to read the Old Testament and the New Testament. So Arabic-speaking Jews often knew Hebrew as their like sacred language or literary language. In the case of Christians, it was often Syriac or Coptic or Greek, depending on where they were from. And you might know that in one of my old videos, I read a psalm fragment. Do you actually pronounce it psalm? Do you say psalm? But like a fragment from the Bible, written in Arabic, in Middle Arabic, but written in Greek letters. Because apparently there was a scribe who spoke Arabic, but in terms of education, he has learned Greek, and he probably didn't know how to write Arabic, but he knew how to write Greek. So he applied that alphabet to the Arabic language that he knew. Also, his Arabic language wasn't. He didn't know classical Arabic very well, because that's what you learn in Islamic schools and Quranic schools. So his attempt of writing classical Arabic showed a lot of his dialectal features. And the same thing happens in Jewish Middle Arabic texts and in Christian Middle Arabic texts written in Syriac or in Coptic, etc. Okay? So the first example here is Jewish Middle Arabic, which means it is written in Hebrew letters, because that's what the scribe knew, and it shows some of his some of the features of his dialect. Not very strong, but it shows the absence of certain classical Arabic features. So let's have a look at like the first paragraph of this. And what you see here is something from the Old Testament, written by Sa'dia Gaon, who was a Jewish scholar from Egypt who translated the Old Testament into Arabic, into Jewish Middle Arabic. So written, as you see here, in the Hebrew alphabet. So this is the original text. This is my transliteration into Arabic, and I didn't transliterate it the way it would be written in classical or modern standard Arabic, but I just transliterated letter by letter. So you see, for example, the name Abram. I didn't write the alif after the ra, because you don't find it in the Hebrew text. Okay, so a letter by letter transliteration. And you see there are no inflectional endings. You can't really tell whether he just didn't write them because they are not written in classical Arabic. But this form of Middle Arabic is still used by Yemenite Jews when they read the Tanakh. They read it in Hebrew and then Aramaic and then this exact Middle Arabic translation, and they don't use the tanween and the Arab, the inflectional endings. So yeah, that tradition is the best we've got. So it seems like it was without inflectional endings. So Allah instead of Allahu, and Qal instead of Qala, etc. Okay, so the Hebrew text, transliteration into Arabic, transliteration into Latin, translation, and a couple of things that you see is there are dots above some letters. So for example, a dot above Dalet means it represents the, like an is. Okay, and the dot above Sadi means, where do we see this? Here, imd, so that is dod. Okay, and ardak here. So, and I'm wondering, because also in Arabic the dot above is the thing that distinguishes these letters. Maybe did he have an idea how to write Arabic, but for religious reasons he used Hebrew, or maybe just because a lot of his audience didn't know how to read Arabic? Might be a combination of several factors here. Okay, but now without further ado, let me just read this. So the first line: إذ قال الله إلى أبرام امض لك من أرضك ومولدك ومن بيت أبيك إلى البلد الذي أريك. Okay, now the Lord said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto the land that I will show thee. Okay, guess I don't need to read all the English translations, just focus on the Middle Arabic, and I'm just getting lazy now and pronouncing it more or less like modern standard Arabic, so you really cannot tell, did he say imd, did he say imj, did that sound exist? Also, the letter Jim, did he say Jim, did he say Gim? I'm just applying a more modern standard Arabic pronunciation to this, if you don't mind. Let's look at the next line. All right, so yeah, let me just point out this faith with a dot above. Any idea what this could be? Of course, this is tha. Okay, just like in Arabic, the dot above is the marking of to distinguish it. So reading: واصنع منك أمة كبيرة وأبارك فيك وأعظم اسمك وتكون بركة. All right, let's look at the next line. So next line: وأبارك مباركيك وشاتمك ألعن ويتبرك بك جميع عشائر الأرض. Or maybe it was جميع, who knows. Next line: فمضى أبرام كما أمره الله ومضى معه لوط وكان أبرام ابن 75 سنة حين خرج من حران. Okay, let me read this. فأخذ أبرام ساراي زوجته ولوط قريبه وجميع سرحم الذي ملكوه والنفوس التي اكتسبوا في حران وخرجوا ليمضوا إلى بلد كنعان وجاءوا إليه. And that was Jewish Middle Arabic. Now I have one more text to present to you, and then we need to wrap this up and call it a day because it's almost 2.5 hours. I have one more sample text in Christian Middle Arabic, and as I said, Christian Middle Arabic was sometimes written in Greek, sometimes or quite often in Syriac, which is called Garshuni, and also sometimes, and I chose that example because I love that language, in Coptic. Okay, so written by Christian priests or monks in Egypt. Let's have a look. So what you see here, as far as I know, is these are glosses that were written next to a Coptic text. So there was a text in Coptic, like Coptic, the language Coptic, but next to the text were glosses translating each line into Arabic, but written in Coptic letters. And then, what is interesting, later another scribe added small Arabic letters to clarify some of the pronunciation So above this kabba, he wrote qaf to make it clear that this is. And you can see I added a transliteration to say waqal. Okay, now this Coptic orthography, there's some facts that I find interesting. For example, wow, Arabic wow, is frequently written with this letter, which you might call beta in Greek or vita, but in Coptic, in Buhari Coptic, it was actually called wida because it was pronounced like a wow. Okay. Instead, or on the other hand, the Arabic ba that we have in do we have ba here? Damn, I made a typo here. This should be ra. Right. Okay, sorry. But here we have ba. And ba is regularly written with, well, this letter, you might call it P or P in Greek, but it was B in Coptic. Okay, let me just, yeah, I've reviewed this many times. Still, mistakes happen and slip my attention. Okay, now it should be correct. Okay, let's read this. So, وقال أنبا يوحنس رايت شيخ وهو باهت. Okay, so yeah, I tried to transliterate it into Arabic as closely to the Middle Arabic text as possible. So I didn't use Hamza, and you will also see there were no tha and dhal in this variety of Arabic. So I'm writing things like talata in Arabic just to show you how it's written in the Coptic alphabet. Okay, and here's transliteration, trying to stay close to the Coptic letters as well, and the translation. So وقال أنبا يوحنس رايت شيخ وهو باهت. So, and Anba Johannes said, I saw an elder who was bewildered. Okay, let's look at the next line. Okay, and again you see these small Arabic letters clarifying the pronunciation. So here's the Coptic letter Tida, and the Ta above to tell you that this is pronounced Ta. And here the Qaf, Ain, Ta, and Ha. So basically, a Coptic scholar should be able to read this properly in Arabic without any trouble. And how would we read this? وثلاثة رهبان قيام على شاطئ البحر. And 3 monks standing by the seashore. Okay, and you say, for example, al-bahr, again with B for the letter ba. And you see that the Coptic letter hori has different roles. Here it's just ha, here it represents ayin, and here it represents ha. Okay, وثلاثة رهبان قيام على شاطئ البحر, and 3 monks standing by the seashore. And you can see also my transliteration, I try to stay close to the way it's written in Coptic, so like talata, talatat. Alright, so this is the next line. فجاهم صوت من الجانب الآخر. Then a voice reached them from the other side. Okay, yeah, I don't think there's a lot that needs to be pointed out. I also find the vowels very interesting. So there's a lot of A vowels, but there's also alpha here, because, well, you don't say echer, you say acher. What I also find interesting is that this letter sima here, there's no sad above as a gloss, so I would have expected somebody to gloss this, but apparently it is clear to them that you say a salt and not a sout. But I'm not sure what this scribe thought, who glossed some letters and didn't gloss others that are also ambiguous. Alright, so another line, and There's also one interesting thing here, that sometimes whole words are glossed in Arabic. Like, I mean, can't you see that this is nar? I think it's very obvious. So why did he gloss this? Anyhow, let me read this. قايل خذوا sorry, it's خذوا. Let me start again. قايل خذوا لكم أجنحة نار وتعالوا إلى عندي. Okay, let me try again. قايل خذوا لكم أجنحة نار وتعالوا إلى عندي. So saying, take wings of fire and come to me. So next slide, and then we're done. So فاثنين منهم أخذوا أجنحة نار وطاروا إلى البر الآخر. So two of them took wings of fire and flew to the other land. Okay, the same thing. Again, nar is glossed. And apart from that, only two letters like ha and ta. And I'm not quite sure what's the system here. It seems kind of arbitrary. So let me just read it again. فاثنين منهم أخذوا أجنحة نار وطاروا إلى البر الآخر. Alright, and that is Coptic, Christian, Middle Arabic. Alright folks, so I'd say I'm done with Arabic, not in general, but on this channel or in this video. Stay tuned for my coming videos. Again, I can't say exactly when they'll come out, so they are all work in progress. Working on Old North Arabian, working on Old South Arabian, I'm working on Giz, working on a video on Egyptian in general. I'm working on a video where I'll read hieroglyphic Egyptian, and I'm working on a video where I'll read Coptic. All of them are somehow stuck in the middle of the process, and I'll just finish them when I find the time. So thanks for your patience, and stay tuned. See you soon. مع السلامة.